When a mother considering abortion meets her baby on ultrasound and hears the heartbeat, it doubles a baby's chance at life. Every day, Preborn rescues 200 lives, which is a true miracle. By the time I finish reading this ad, 2 more babies will have been taken by abortion. Just $28 could be the difference between life and death. So please join the fight by sponsoring 1, 2, 3, or 200 ultrasounds. All gifts are tax deductible. To donate, just dial pound 250 and say the keyword baby. Again, that's pound 250 baby, or you can visit preborn.com/Candace. That's preborn.com/Candace. Yeah, I don't think most people know this, and it's interesting now because I'm now realizing that I know nothing about history. And so many people think it was this brave thing that Bob Woodward did and was in contact with Deep Throat, but it was actually the state overthrowing Nixon. Like the deep state overthrew Nixon. They wanted him out, and then they wanted to make it seem like it was this like heroic thing to the public. So actually Nixon was a victim of the deep state.
That is correct.
Just like JFK was before him. And so realizing that Bob Woodward, his claim to fame is, I had a source. Yeah, your source was the CIA that was trying to radically oust a president, stage a coup, essentially. Yeah. So you realize then at that point, and by the way, just to slow this down, I know people that watch this already know about Operation Mockingbird, but it is really one of the most crucial ones to understanding the mainstream media web. The CIA puts this into place and quite literally just puts journalists on the CIA payroll to be able to control the information that's getting out to the public after JFK gets shot. They're worried about what's going to happen. The public is asking too many questions, so they just want journalists to all say the exact same thing. And we still see this today. There was no discontinuation of Project Mockingbird. So you make the mistake of going, there must be a noble media member at the Washington Post.
That was all in the past. It doesn't continue today. Well,
and what year is this, by the way?
What's that?
What year is this that you're dealing with?
Let's see, that would be 2012.
Okay.
And then that's when I wrote From the Company Shadows. And then I started experiencing firsthand other major publishers, when I wrote From the Company of Shadows, no, we can't touch that. We don't want to make the CIA mad. And the CIA had threatened a lot of journalists and a lot of publishers, don't touch anything against the CIA. So they were all terrified. And plus, the editors of the Washington Post is one of the founders of Mockingbird, Philip and Catherine
New York
Grant.
Times.
What's that?
One of the highest paid.
New York Times, yes. Time Magazine. They had more than 400 reporters and news anchors on CIA payroll when Operation Mockingbird started. And now they operate 2 ways. A journalist with any major news media or news periodical knows that if they do a real investigative piece on the CIA, they're done. I mean, their editors tell them that many editors have a quid pro quo with the CIA not to report negatively on the CIA. And there's some major news organizations that people watch that have that relationship. And so if they say anything negative about the CIA will stop feeding them stories so that they can get the first scoop and cut them off. And that's going on right now with several well-known news organizations. And I mentioned the one with the CIA lapel pin. Clearly going on. Then this last administration, thank God, which is out the back door, started what's called the Trusted News Initiative, where the CIA signed an agreement, or the Associated Press, the Washington Post, of course, and all 4 social media companies in the Trusted News Initiative signed an agreement with the DNI and the CIA not to censor certain pieces of information on all social media and in their reporting. Literally signed an agreement not to do that. Now, when you sign a CIA agreement, especially if there's money involved, they'll put you under a non-disclosure agreement with a threat of prison if you talk about anything you're not supposed to talk about. And that's how the CIA controls journalists. That's why there are no whistleblowers until recently, because of the NDA. You come out and you talk about this, you're going to prison. You sign a secrecy agreement as an officer, never to put anything out without the CIA approving it, which means they'll redact or black out the entire thing, which they did in my first book. And sit on it for a year or 2. That's what they do every single time. And some of that's in the book. It's
really compelling to consider that you did what you thought was an act of service, trying to rescue the lives of other CIA servicemen. Report this, hey, this must be by accident that we have this exposure to them, that people can access their information via visa application, whatever it is. And this resulted in you being poisoned Like they were just gonna poison you and your family because how dare you? And it was a direct order. Of course, my mind is instantly running. Why would they not want to deal with that? Of course, if they realize that CIA servicemen can be killed, and then of course my mind then instantly goes to because they kind of wanted them to get killed so they could, declare an act of war against whatever target it is. They killed somebody in the CIA, and this is their favorite, a remarkable intelligence failure. They were somehow able to access the information by accident. We had no idea.
Exactly.
But in reality, they wanted these people to be harmed.
Why would they not take care of something that clearly put their agents' lives at risk? Why would they leave it there to the point of covering it up, threatening me and then taking the report off the CIA server, unless they wanted that vulnerability there to use if there was a chief of station who wasn't playing by the book, or they wanted to plausible denial for some operation that went bad to blame, how it happened. And that's the only logical conclusion.
I just think of false flags. It's like somebody gets hurt and then you say, you had no idea how this happened, and now we have to retaliate because our guys are getting killed, or somebody high up got killed. And of course we're going to defend, the homeland. And this is something that people are asking all the time. Like, how many false flag attacks have there been where they allowed these remarkable security failures to happen?
Several.
A lot.
Several. From, goodness gracious, from the Vietnam War with the Gulf of Tonkin, that was a false flag. The Vietnamese ships on the radar attacking, those were fake. The CIA added those on the radar that they gave to Congress. The Vietnam War was started by a false flag. And look at 50,000 American soldiers died, and 1 million Vietnamese civilians died because of that. And then you go to Iraq, the false intelligence from Iraq, 500,000 Iraqi civilians, 2,500 U.S. troops were killed, and 200,000 U.S. service personnel were badly injured because of false intelligence from the CIA.
Remarkable intelligence failure.
Yeah.
Even Pearl Harbor, they had warnings of it happening that they chose to ignore. I was watching this whole documentary on it, and I was like, oh, okay. It was just a remarkable intelligence failure. They heard that it was going to happen, and then it happened, and then what do you know? We're in World War II.
Yeah.
And this just really gets into the military-industrial complex, because they need to make sure that the public is on their side.
Yeah.
And that is why this book, Chaos, blew my mind. To think that the Charles Manson murders, which fundamentally changed, people were so traumatized by how graphic these murders were.
Yeah.
And to know the CIA was there that night. I mean, what that Tom O'Neill uncovered, and almost he dedicated his whole life to it. He was flat broke and just filing FOIA requests for years, realizing that the public thought that Charles Manson just hypnotized some people to do these crazy things. But in reality, everything we know about the Manson murders, this guy was MK Ultra. He was trained by the government. And this was an order for people to, I guess, to just end the hippie dream. They wanted to go to war. The hippies were to love rock and roll. And this, leading up to the Vietnam War, LBJ, bloodthirst, Vietnam, Cambodia. It's incredible the lengths they will go through to get the public on the side of war. And
it's extremely upsetting.
And then even in that, back in the 60s, that was a pretty much Project Mockingbird, because he explained how all the press then was writing every minute, every detail, because they wanted to traumatize the press. And these moments are traumatizing. Pearl Harbor, traumatizing. I always go back to my propaganda as a child in school, 9/11. And now I think back at it, I'm going, oh my gosh, just the words they use, and they don't want to think about anything but the emotion of it, right? Like, and so we get in line and we go, okay, yeah, no, we're totally okay with establishing TSA and giving up all of our freedoms in order for us to stay safe.
Gutting the Constitution.
Because all they're doing is showing us these images and talking about terrorism. And I was in the classroom and they're telling us, in order to be safe, to keep you safe, and then we have to go to war, and we can't just quickly say war in Iraq is okay. Don't even ask questions, even though there were Saudis in the plane.
Yeah.
All it takes is something very traumatizing to happen, Operation Mockingbird in full effect, and you can, in most instances, get the public to be persuaded to go into a war, a conflict that they know nothing about.
You nailed it. You nailed it. Yes, and in terms of 9/11, I taught criminal investigations at a college, and I did investigations, obviously, espionage investigations. In the agency, a criminal investigation was never done on 9/11. They automatically blamed it on terrorism. They didn't examine any of the evidence. As a matter of fact, they bust out all of the iron and steel on barges to China the next day. And they made these ridiculous, and when they do their propaganda, it seems so stupid on its face, but they repeat it so many times. For example, well, we can prove that it was such and such hijacker that flew the plane in the building because we found his passport laying on E Street.
So stupid.
What? Let's see. The plane was incinerated. The floor above and below the plane were incinerated. There was absolutely nothing left
Couldn't
of
recover bodies.
The building was powder. But amazingly, they found this passport that proved their narrative. Oh, and
so
there's more.
This year, we did a 2-episode series on 9/11 to go backwards because I was a child and to show people. We found these old clips and showed them. Do you realize how much we were lied to about 9/11? Like, it's just unbelievable when you look back at everything they told. Astounding. And then the things that they ignored that happened that day and the presence of the Mossad that was there, and they just never really answered the question. And just
Tower 7?
Tower 7 was very clearly just dropped to the, come on.
You cannot explain that away.
I mean, and then when you learn even more, which I didn't even show on the show, about the art students that were there, that were also intelligence
Israeli
agents.
art students, and then
the weeks leading up, just like,
it's
what
a coincidence.
What a coincidence.
And I did some research on plane crashes, as I'm sure many of your viewers have. And every single plane crash, especially a large aircraft, there's always wreckage left of the parts that can't be blown apart. The landing gear and the engines specifically. A lot of times the nose cone. Well, Shanksville, Pennsylvania, no wreckage whatsoever. The Pentagon, there were no engines. There were none of the landing gear. Nothing.
And yet there were servicemen around that said, I've served in active military. It was a missile. I can tell you the sound of a missile. And they ignored all of this. And then we even pulled an old clip of a CNN journalist who was on the ground that day and said, I got up close, there's no plane. And they just kind of tried to wipe this from the internet.
Yeah.
And so we had to dig up this. I'm like, you had a CNN journalist who was just probably telling the truth. And was like, I'm here. This is amazing. Like, I got up close. There's no plane.
Yeah.
And you just see this perfect hole. And then you have all these people who have been in active military zones who said, I heard a missile that day. They don't release, they classify images of the plane
videotape from the gas station.